So, a bit of a change of theme. We've got demonstrating integrations with arches from these two guys who've just walked up behind me in a menacing fashion. And Samuel and Rob, I'll let you describe what you're going to do, and I'll give you a wee warning once we get to 20 minutes.
Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about archers participating in a wider data ecosystem where archers is primarily used as a particular system of record for particular types of data, but a lot of the ways that that data is presented, interrogated and delivered is outside of archers itself. The way that we do that is using an open source platform that we have ourselves called SIM, which is a middleware application. It is designed to integrate with and import data from lots of different platforms, both from individual data sets and from an aggregation perspective. I'm going to talk a little bit about SIM to give you a background rather than just talking over it, and then I'm going to hand over to Samuel, who's going to talk about the way that's been done from an archer's perspective. Okay, so basically the SIM, this is about a couple of integrations that we've done with Manx National Heritage and the Royal Commission for Ancient and Historic Monuments of Wales. That's quite a mouthful. And essentially, the SIM sits in between the public view and moves the data around for presentation. The SIM middleware is a data model agnostic platform for ingesting data. It's actually an ELT pipeline rather than an ETL pipeline, which we were discussing yesterday, which kind of means that you can bring the data in without doing anything in advance and then model it and map it within the SIM itself. It's used in quite a lot of organisations at the moment, kind of scalable for bringing large-scale aggregations together. And at the moment, it's actually, just as a statistic, there's about 200 million items across the different implementations. A few of the people that are actually using it at the moment are just as a shameless plug, but there you go. And then moving on to what it's actually doing. So basically, it's a scheduling platform to talk to multiple systems providers, Archers being one of them. It brings the data into an internal graph representation on a scheduled basis, works out what's changed, resolves a graph, works out what the changes affect more widely, and then it synchronizes different target platforms where the data can be further syndicated. So as an example, it can syndicate content further on into a triple store, into Elasticsearch for enterprise, back into other target systems. So it can write data back into Archers, for example, or it can write data back into the systems like collections management systems, etc. So it kind of makes this big network of joined up data, which allows the Archers instances that we're talking about to kind of play in that wider environment. It's data model agnostic, which kind of means that what it doesn't do is it doesn't try and represent a kind of slimmed down or reduced version. It tries to represent the full richness of the Archer's data for sharing. So this was just an example. The only thing it needs to know about the data is what it is, where it came from, and how you identify it. So it has no concept of what it is it's actually managing. It's just a JSON structure behind the scenes. And then you just need to know those basic things and also about how relationships are made to other items. So those are the only constructs that it understands. You bring the data in and then it kind of turns it into a graph, maintains the full richness. And then one of the things it has to handle, if you're thinking about the integrations, is you have to be able to handle things that are missing. So you don't necessarily know how one system is going to relate to another system, how the data is going to be in Archers, etc. So what it has to understand is it has to build a graph internally, but it has to understand the status of the graph, because it can kind of say, "This I've got a reference to this thing, but it doesn't exist at the moment. So it builds a graph that's represented in JSON as there on the right, but it has an extra concept that it can't get any further within this graph because it's reached a dead end with something that should be there. So the whole idea is it allows an organisation to build all this network of different systems that reference each other indirectly, potentially. And then it can also tell you if your particular system that's referencing an item over here, if somebody's put a typo in, for example, because they aren't foreign key references, it can kind of say, you're telling me that this thing's there, but I can't find it in your data graph in your environment. One of the reasons that it's been used from the Archer's perspective with the organisations that we're working with is it kind of simplifies the way of sharing data more widely. So it offers obviously standard things, enterprise search, triple store, but obviously things like vector searching, using external large language models to generate similarity in vectors, REST APIs, GraphQL, and obviously, as Phil was saying earlier, about delivering the content. Linked art is one of the things that it can actually use to actually deliver the content as well, which was always kind of interested from a lingo perspective about the choice of formats. So it's basically designed to handle that sharing more widely. One of the other things it provides for the data within Archers as well, if you like, is that when you bring the data out, it allows you to enrich the data with AI services, lots of kind of mechanisms for enriching and making the data potentially more findable and searchable to end users. And then that data can be written back into Archers if required. So this is just some examples. It basically providing auditing and across all of the data systems, etc. I won't go into that too much because obviously the key thing here from the perspective of the Archers conference is the way that this works from an Archers perspective. But this is obviously the way that we've done it, and obviously it's part of the overall story. There's information about the open source platform online, documentation, etc. But obviously, and it has built-in Archers plugins that allow you to just plug it into an Archers instance and start sharing the data more widely. Over to you, Samuel.
There's a nice little advert. Yeah, so Sim's been going for quite a while, long before we were involved in Archers, really. And like Rob said, the two projects that this sort of stemmed from were Manx National Heritage and RCHMW, or the Royal Commission on Ancient Historical Monuments of Wales. So they both use Sim as a middleware for their content management systems, so Mimsy and Atom. I think previously they used these two to store their Archers, well, pre-Archers, their cultural heritage data. But then they came along to Archers because it was much better for their use case, and then they still wanted to use the Sim. So this is where we got to. So in order to work with the Sim, it obviously needs to be populated with what Archers sees and whenever changes are made to Archers. So we first started looking at this because we needed two APIs and some core changes, right? So Sim needs to look at the most recent edits. For Archers, the edit log, as I'm sure we're all aware of, is sort of too good. It stores a lot of things, which is really good for Archers. You need to know resource creations, resource deletions, and then the tile deletions, creations, edits, etc. For Sim, we only need to know what the last change was per resource. So whether a resource has just been deleted and then it can be forgotten about, but it can still stay in this table as gone. Maybe it will come back, maybe not. So we created our own Django model called the latest resource edit. So as again, most people are clearly aware, for 7 resources, the edit log contains about 34 rows. This obviously includes the system settings, but with ours, we just need those 7. So we can see here that it's got tile edits, tile creates, and this is what Sim needs to hear from. So we then created an API so that Sim could communicate. Again, this just uses the latest resource edits table. There's a bit of a JSON structure there to see what it actually looks like. But on the Sim side, it's hitting this endpoint. It's passing the dates that it needs to update itself with. There's bits of pagination there, but that's essentially what it needs. So you create a new Archers record. It shows up in this JSON output, and then the Sim sees that a new Archers record's been created. Ingest it all, it'll process it in sim, and then it'll show up in the front end. And then the second API we needed was just to export all concepts and concept schemes. Not sure if we even need this anymore going forward, but this just allowed sim to see what the concept UUIDs were and what their values were. So yeah, like I said, it uses these two API endpoints to update itself, whether they're creations, edits, deletions, you name it, and it ensures sim is up to date with Arches. So for Manx National Heritage, their front end, their public-facing interface, that everything that comes from Mimsy and Arches goes into sim and is displayed on iMuseum, and the same with RCHMW is on Covlane. So this all works nicely until the Isle of Man were interested in getting their Mimsy data viewable in Arches, which seemed pretty cool. So Mimsy worked the same as Arches, really working with the sim. Its record creations and everything were ingested by the sim. But to see this data in Arches, we pushed we created a new Elasticsearch index and a new Elasticsearch really for all this data to be stored on, and then using Arches and the associated Arches ID, which exists in the Mimsy records because there's some like Duff stub records that exist because these are the Arches ones. We can use it to query very quickly, and then this allows the data to be seen in Arches. So it's currently viewable on the map pop-up. In hindsight, probably not a great place to put it. It should exist on the search result, really, and that's where we plan to move it soon. But here you can see this resource in Arches also has links in Mimsy. So clicking the linked resources opens up a very simple looking UI with a list of all of these linked resources. These can be publications, they can be archives, objects, all the sorts of things that Mimsy stores. And then again, if you click on one, these are examples of what they would look like. Again, it's very simple stuff, purely displaying the data in a list format, but it allows people to use Arches. I guess the people who use Arches primarily, rather than iMuseum, they can see this information and they don't have to move about. So that's quite nice. So this happened quite a few years back now, back in version 6. Now this is before the nice pattern of Arches applications, which changed everything. So we sort of had to change a lot of core Arches to include our additions. So adding the APIs, adding the model changes. It meant that upgrading became quite difficult. I'll talk more about why, but this is just the Arches side. You know, you're dealing with this complex stuff that you've added. So you're now on a fork. You have to merge the new version. See, has a new version broken something? So it can be a bit painful. But with the application format, we could stick all this code in its own application. Especially the model changes makes it really nice because we can add things as much as we want, add new migrations. So this new application contains everything that it did before. We've got the latest resource edit table, which uses the edit log, where it uses a signal to see has the edit log been populated, and then it looks, is this resource already in the table? If not, add it. If it has, then tell us the new update. We've stuck the APIs in there, which is nice, and because the applications allow you to sort of register a plugin, it's possible that we can have sort of a front end, like a dashboard type thing. Whether this is even needed, because people are using Arches to integrate with the sim, would they need to see this sort of stuff, or would it just be an admin side? We've not really decided yet, but it's really nice that we have the opportunity to do such a thing. So we do plan to keep this going really with RCHMW and Isle of Man, hopefully this year as well. So it'll help to improve the ongoing application, and for any future Arches projects that want to integrate with sim, it's there, so it's really good. The reverse work is yet to be added. There's a question of whether it will be added because there's I imagine there's a lot of customizations there based on what exists in Mimsy or whatever your CMS is. So that's something else to think about. But one of the things we'd quite like to get improved, and it's this bottom point about the arches to sim mappings. So currently, you sort of have to manually add your node IDs to the sim mappings, which you can imagine is not very fun. And we've had it where either mass data needs to be deleted, exported, that sort of thing, re-imported, which isn't great if there's no persistent identifier. Even more so if you have to make graph changes, or if somehow the node IDs in your graph change, then you're a bit screwed because you have to rewrite everything, which is why I say upgrading's a bit scary, because if you're just doing simple upgrades, it's fine, but major versions, you don't want to break anything. So yeah, we'd quite like to possibly a new API or some method to pass this information directly to the sim. So if anything has changed, the sim can know and it can update it. And then there's also the case of the sim models. If they change, archers may need to know about it. So there's a bit of a two-way relationship there. And I'm happy that people have been discussing URIs already, because, like I say, this is one of our issues. So if that is a possibility, or if that is in the roadmap, I know at the moment it's just with sort of lingo concepts and stuff, but whether it's resource IDs, bits of the graph, anything like this, yeah, I think it would make life a lot easier, and it's something that we're looking at internally as well. So that's pretty much it. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much, guys. We've got a bit of time for quizzing, so I think we just need a standing mic beside you. No, but it's good. Thank you, Rob.
Thanks for the talk. It's pretty interesting, and SIM itself, I think, is a pretty fascinating technology, so excited to kind of understand that more. You were talking about a custom API to understand kind of the latest edit work, and I don't know if you were aware of like the activity stream endpoint that I think Arches has that kind of, I think, gives that kind of information.
Okay, no, not massively.
Okay.
That is somewhat new. Newish.
It's newish, yeah. I mean, it's, but I know that Getty uses it themselves to essentially keep a Sparkle database in sync and understand what happened since the last time they queried the endpoint. So,
yeah,
just
I think that probably would be a better way to go.
FYI.
Especially, we were moving everything from the previous implementation to this application, and then sort of deciding what do we need to keep, what do we need to bin.
Right.
This easily could be something to put in the bin, really, because when I was testing it with some Arches for HR workflows, when you're saving multiple tiles at the same time, it can get quite, messy. So I think that's probably a good way to go.
Yeah.
We'll go with Rob and then Stuart, if that's okay.
This is really great. I think there's obviously a lot of potential for SIM to be useful with Arches. Did you consider node aliases as a solution to that last woe that you were describing? Burst your bubble quickly first. The persistent identifiers is for business data, not graph data currently, and so it's probably not going to solve that problem. But we have been using node aliases a lot for similar kinds of issues. I was wondering if you've done anything with that or pursued that.
Yet, no.
I would key into Jacob's talk about query sets because it aliases all data on node or on node aliases, and that could be really useful.
No, that does seem really useful.
Side note question: how difficult is it to, as a developer, to stand up SIM? Like, if I wanted to this afternoon, like, stand up SIM alongside my development environment for Arches, how could I do that?
You'll have to tell us how good the docs are.
Fair enough.
Yeah, and actually to that point as well, I'll be quite interested in Jacob's presentation, and there's probably also some interest from the type of stuff we're doing with the ORM work, is trying to basically address some of those issues too in a slightly different way. Great, thanks, Stuart.
I just wanted to comment on the activity streams that has the same problem, that it's on the tile level and not on the resource level. So we tried to use it as well, and then it was just too much information. So we track the resources as well, just whenever a resource has changed directly.
Because one of the things is we need to maintain. Obviously, most of these things result in a public-facing URL, which gets bookmarked. And so we obviously have to persist. We have to persist it from that perspective. It's a bit of a non-starter for it to change. So it becomes quite an issue if we can't do that.
Great talk, guys. The SIM's definitely super intriguing. I think there's a lot of potential there, and so, which is sort of the basis of my question. And that is, have you used SIM to integrate with systems that aren't worried about managing cultural heritage data? Like, what if we were working with environmental data, and so we had different mappings, for example? Like, how flexibly could we expect the SIM to be there?
When I said it doesn't have a model, it genuinely doesn't. So we've used it to, so for example, the historical TT database for the Isle of Man, which is, motorbikes, riders, racers, circuits, all of that, that's in SIM. We've used it to model skeletons and skeletal pathology for Museum of London Archaeology. So it kind of can, well, I'm being recorded. I'd say it can model pretty much most things, but I don't, blank that out. I think things like environmental stuff that wouldn't be an issue, and I think things like related things we use it to model diary for room closures in institutions and things like that. So it's
that was actually kind of the exact use case I was thinking of. So we could have a longer chat about that.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.